Welcome back to another episode of Profitable Publishing. Today we're going to be talking about how having a well-written book can actually shorten your sales calls and better qualify your customers. I'm Ashley, I'm your host. I'm a book marketing strategist and self-publishing consultant, and I support coaches, consultants, speakers, and service providers to package their expertise into a profitable book that builds their brand, attracts their clients, and supports real business growth. Now, today is a topic that I love, and it actually came from a conversation that I had online over on Facebook with one of my sales coaches, Nat Bullen, and she and I were just talking, and in her comments, this kind of came up. And so I said, well, actually, let me go ahead and make an episode about that. And so here we are. So when you have a book that is, of course, well written, and also crafted in a way that helps your reader to have a transformation or that can provide a foundation for the frameworks you create or for the processes or structures that you provide clients, then it's really also possible for it to actually shorten the conversations that you have to have on sales calls and inside of coaching calls that you might have inside of your programs and things of that sort. Because when you have structured your book in a way that you are handling objections, that you are addressing mindset blocks that people might have when they're looking at purchasing your services, then someone who actually sits down and takes the time to read your book is already having time to process those things before they get on a call with you. And of course, you don't want to wait for those things to kind of happen and those wheels to start turning when they're with you, because then that means that can make it for a longer call, as well as that might lead to them needing more time to decide. Instead, you want them to be able to have the opportunity to kind of handle some of those, or if not all of those objections before they get on a call with you. And I'm saying call, but this could also be in terms of like DMs, if that's how you do your sales process, whatever the touch point is where they have to connect with you in order to buy, or the point in which people typically are going to want to ask you questions. Handling a lot of that beforehand is helpful, and it just makes it a smoother process. And then on the flip side, if this is someone who is already inside of your existing programs, then I'm going to talk about some of the ways that you can actually help them to get a deeper understanding and better transformations by having a book that really is suited to support them inside of your program as an extension of you. Because if you are a service provider, if you're a speaker, if you're a coach, consultant, you're likely stretched thin, and you likely have this duality that you're trying to process in addition to being an author. You likely are trying to support clients, but also have items in place to support yourself. So having things like, okay, I'm working on these things for my clients, but also I need to have my own structures in place for me in order to attract more clients. And so for me in particular, for example, I publish my own books, but then also I publish books for other clients. And so balancing that can be a little tricky if you don't have certain things in place. And creating a book that helps you to be able to cut down on some of those objections, to be able to help your potential client, a lead, whoever it may be able to get a better understanding of how you operate, how your framework can help people, to get kind of a behind the scenes look before they hop on a call with you. And I say hop casually because we schedule calls around here, but they are able to get a glimpse inside of what it would be like to work with you because they've spent hours reading or listening to your book. And that's just a really powerful thing. So I'm going to give you 3 ways how having a well-written and well-created book will help you to be able to shorten your calls. And so the first one is that your book actually increases your credibility and your authority. Now, at this point, if you've been listening to the podcast, you probably already know this, but we're going to focus on this in the sense of consult calls. So because your book will be a tool that basically can house your frameworks, can really lay out your structure and your system that you use, then acclimating somebody to that is helpful before they join your programs, because it shows that you have a proven process. It shows that you've also gotten results, because in your book you could include case studies, not just testimonials, but case studies that show them that, okay, this is the transformation that I've helped somebody get. And when people have time to sit and process those things, it also helps to increase the belief that you can also help them do that. Of course, there are certain things that might not be apples to apples comparisons. However, it helps to increase the the belief that that is possible for them. Because for a lot of folks, especially in the service industry, a lot of people that you might be helping might not think that it's possible for them. They might not even know that what type of transformation you provide is even a thing. Or they might be discouraged from working with someone else or not working with someone else. And so anything you can do to basically open up their eyes and let them know that, hey, there are options out there. You don't have to do this alone is a beautiful thing. And one thing also to consider when it comes to your credibility and your authority, most people who say they want to write a book don't actually write a book. I was looking at a statistic recently, and it was that less than 10% of people who say that they want to write a book actually do. So the fact that you've actually taken the time to condense your years of experience, to condense your speeches or whatever the case may be, into a book that someone can just pick up and read in a couple hours, or that they can spend time with you, I'm using air quotes, spend time with you by reading your book, that is something that in the author space, we might take for granted because it's like, oh, okay, in the groups that you're in, everybody has a book. Service providers, a lot of people have books. Coaches, a lot of people have books. However, it's not something that the greater majority of the population has. And so that's still a really big deal to people outside of your industry and people outside of the author community. So don't take that lightly. And then when you've actually taken the time to condense those thoughts, to put them in an order that will help a customer, whether it is just giving them the belief or actually giving them the full step-by-step framework, or the full step-by-step process, then it also lets people know, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. They're not just making up stuff. They're not just randomly deciding that, oh, when we get on a call, that they're just going to pull something out of left field. They're going to make sure that they follow their process, follow their system. But also, it's going to help them to understand, do I even really like this person's personality? Do I like how they operate? Do I like how they think? And it's almost as if when someone's reading your book that they have you inside of their head because you're talking to them, depending upon how you've written the book. And so that can just be very helpful. And then when they end up with you on a call, then it's like, oh, okay, this is a full circle moment. You are exactly who you said you were in your book. This sounds like you. I feel comfortable. I'm ready to sign up. Now let's move into our second reason why having a well-written book can actually help you shorten sales calls and have deeper conversations with your customers. So the second one is that it helps you to keep your clients on track in your customer journey or your process. And this could be kind of a dual thing. It could keep you on track with them if you're somebody whose mind wanders, and it can also help keep your customer on track. Now, over the course of my career and my time working with authors or others and other businesses that I've had, there is something that you might be familiar with called scope creep. And so it is something where you say, okay, this is the defined parameters of your project. And then sometimes the client, typically the client, if this is happening, decides, okay, well, I want to ask about this, or I want to ask about this, or can we do this? Now, of course, if you want to add on other things, that's fine. However, this is something that can really help with this by having your items packaged into a book or having your expertise packaged into a book, because you have a laid out framework, you have a laid out structure. And when it comes to adding on other stuff, it's a lot easier to say, well, actually, we're right here in this section. We're on chapter blah, blah, blah. And we'll either get to that in this chapter, or actually I have a separate service for that. It just gives you a little bit of a stronger foundation, a little stronger of a way to say, actually, no, these are my guardrails, especially for someone who is just like super nice and you don't want to hurt people's feelings and you have a hard time saying no. Then when you have it in your book and you have your book set up in a way that supports your customers with your framework or with your process, it's a lot easier to say, hey, we got to stay the course. I know that this is also something shiny and new and interesting, but if you want to get that result that we talked about at the beginning, then we need to follow this path. And so that can be really freeing. And then for your customer, it also helps them to see like, okay, we're here and then this is where we're going. I know that when working with folks, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I really want to get to that goal and I don't really see the end goal just yet. But if they're able to see your structure and your framework within your book, then it's like, okay, I know this is coming up in chapter 10. So I'm going to hold off. I'm not going to ask that question just yet. I know that's going to be something that we discuss. And so that kind of puts me at ease as the customer, because I know that my person that I've hired has already thought about this, and we're going to get to that later. And so this is something that works whether you are the customer or neurodivergent, whether you have other things going on. For example, I'm the mom of two little ones. And so having that structure, having that setting, being able to crack open my book and say, hey, we're going to use page 67. And these are the different options that we can choose from that I know work for clients. Which one would you like to do? It just helps you have a better conversation and helps you to also put the guardrails on those conversations with customers. Then the third reason is that you can actually have better comprehension for you and your customer. So I'm going to dig into my teacher bag for a minute. When you have some type of visual representation, it helps people to better process the information. So this one leans more towards people who are already your clients, where you're having the coaching calls with them or you're trying to map out something together. And so having that visual helps them to understand it on a deeper level. And this is actually something that comes from neuroscience. And so I'm not going to get too geeky and too sciencey, but for example, when you think about like learning how to read, part of the reason why we read to kids or read to babies or whoever is that the auditory processing part develops. And then when you match that with the print, then it gives your brain more than one way to kind of connect those to process it together. And so even if you already know how to read, same is true for you as an adult. If you have more than one way that you are receiving that information, it helps you to be able to process it better. So if you're on a coaching call with a client and you're trying to explain some structure, providing that within your book gives them something else for them to hold on to, especially if it's a visual cue. So now you're tapping into the auditory part as well as the visual part for them to be able to say, oh, okay, this is what they're talking about. I see the visual. I get the messaging that they're saying. And it's just a quicker process than having to go like log into an account in a course. And nothing's wrong with courses, but it's a lot easier to just say, okay, turn to page 105. There's a diagram right there. We're going to walk through this process and then boom, boom, boom. It just makes it a lot easier. And then also people tend to forget things. So the things that you've said in your book, you likely are going to say similar things or the exact same thing on your calls. And so hearing it more than once helps it to stick for them. And so having it in a book, having it in your messaging, having it in the conversations that you have helps them to be able to better process it. All right, and our last reason is that you can actually have deeper conversations in less time. So when you have people who have read your book or at least started reading your book, maybe they haven't quite finished it, they're able to understand the concepts that you present on a deeper level. And that means that when you get to those calls, you're going to have more informed conversations and they're also going to have more insightful questions that they're going to ask you. So for example, if you're tired of answering the same question over and over and over again, or tired of seeing the same question over and over and over again, packaging that into a book is a great way to say, hey, I know that you need help with XYZ. I actually have done all of the legwork for you in my book. Go ahead and grab a copy. And so, for example, not that I'm tired of seeing this question, but online I often see, okay, what's the best platform to publish with? Now, there are different platforms. However, typically they're going to be a couple that people tend to gravitate towards, and there's certain pros and cons to each of those. So that's something that I will feature in my next book that talks about publishing, is that there's certain things you want to look out for. If this is your goal, then you should go with this platform, or really you should do multiple platforms because why not? So those are things that can be easily addressed. So that way you're not getting on a call and someone's asking you that question and then it ends up being a coaching call when really it should have been a consult call because they think, oh, okay, I have a call with this person. They know these things. I need to get these things from them, as opposed to they know these things. I've read their book about the foundational elements of what they talk about. And now I want to ask them what makes them a good fit for me, as opposed to general things about your industry. So for example, another thing could be, instead of asking like, how do I sell my book on social media? Then someone might ask instead, okay, I've tried this strategy on social media, but I think that maybe I could improve in this area within that. What do you think? That would be a more informed question, or they'd actually be able to come to the table and say, hey, I've tried the strategy that you mentioned on page yada yada. Can you help me to see what areas where I can improve upon this or what I might have done wrong with implementing this strategy? That's a much deeper and much more insightful question that someone might ask on a coaching call, as opposed to me listing out all the different ways that you could market your book on social media. And so with that, that means that you're having deeper conversations with your customers. And then that means that they're getting deeper transformations. They're able to implement the strategies. They're able to at least have a deeper awareness of the strategy, as opposed to just asking base level questions. And once again, not to throw shade or anything like that at those who need those base level questions. However, those could be answered in your book. Those could be answered in a short form video or things of that sort, as opposed to waiting to get on a call that was booked ahead of time with you. And then also with those deeper conversations, I've had instances where clients actually quote my book back to me. And it's like kind of a surreal moment. But when you think about it, when you're in school, when you're in college or trade school or whatever the case may be, there were times where your professor might ask you, okay, you need to read X pages in the book that they may or may not have written, and they've taken the time to do the research. So, in essence, when you're creating your book, you've taken the time to do the years of experience, the years of working with clients, the years of speaking, and you capture that all into something that's a bite sized thing that they can easily digest. So, you're saving them time and energy. And also, you're making it so that they are hitting the high points and being able to use that to process to do whatever it is that the transformation is that you're wanting them to do. And so it's a compact way to capture your ideas, and it makes it a lot easier for people to process when it's written the right way and when it's structured the right way. And so if this is something you need support with, then I invite you to book a call with me to see if my Profitable Publishing Partner Service will be a good fit for you. And so this is where I walk clients through the process of writing, publishing, and releasing their book in a way that attracts their audience and helps them to be able to package their expertise. And so you can visit profitableselfpublishing.com/partner or click the link in the show notes, and you'll be able to see a link to book a call with me. Or if you're ready to sign up, you'll have information there as well. All right, so to wrap up, gentle reminders. Reading your book before someone works with you is actually a great way for them to be better qualified to be a client. And so what I mean by that is that if someone has spent the time to read your 100-page book, your 150, 200-page book, however long your book is, they are more likely to actually like you. They are more likely to leave a review, and they're more likely to want to actually work with you to get that next step. My brother, who's an email copywriter, likes to say that every problem you solve for someone creates a new problem. And so your book, even though it will be great, it'll be written well, it will be packaged wonderfully, it's going to create the next step for them that they're going to need additional support. And so because they have completed your book or they've read enough of your book to understand how you operate, if they want to work with you, they're going to be more inclined to reach out to you, especially if you put things within your book to be able to encourage them to do that. And they are more qualified than someone who just randomly found you from a video. And I say that because, and the video folks, I'm not saying if you're a social media person listening and you're like, video is king, video is queen, video is king and queen. However, someone who has read your book, they are more qualified than someone who's like found you via like a short or a reel. Now, if they watched a YouTube video of you, that's like a long form video. Okay, that's different. However, really sitting down and reading your book gives a deeper level of commitment from that person because they actually spent the time to do that as opposed to just swiping on their phone. And so to back this up, I found a quote from Publishers Weekly. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a trade magazine in the publishing space. And so this was from 2023, but the quote is from Juliana Lehman, and she says that a reader is a more sophisticated lead. They are at a place in their journey where they want to invest more time in consuming content rather than just another freebie that might sit unopened in their inbox. And I think that just really speaks to the power of having a well-written book that attracts your audience and actually supports them before you even get on the phone with them. And so if that's something you're looking for, I encourage you to check out the Profitable Publishing Partner Service. Click the link in the description, and let's see if this is a good fit for you to help package your expertise into a profitable book. Until next time, I want to remind you of the 4 reasons why having a book that is well written and well positioned helps you to be able to shorten your sales calls and client calls. So the first reason is that your book increases your credibility and your authority. The second one is that it can actually keep your clients on track in their journey or process with you. The third one is that it will help your clients have better comprehension with your processes and with your frameworks. And then lastly, it helps you to have deeper conversations in shorter amounts of time. Until next time, stay profitable.